As some of you might know already, my name is Ramakant Agnihotri. I retired from the University of Delhi as Professor of Linguistics. The areas in which I specialize include applied linguistics, sociolinguistics, and language and education. And I have been associated with a large number of societies and non-government organizations working in the field of language and education in general. We have already done 2 modules of applied linguistics. So, this is the course on applied linguistics, and today we will do the 3rd module. The 3rd module concerns how do we at least begin to understand the relationship between language and society, and why is it important for a school teacher, for a classroom teacher, to be able to appreciate this relationship, that what is language, what is society, and what is the network of relationships between language and society. So, for language is concerned, we have already sort of shared with you to some extent that there are 2 extremes. One is the language faculty with which we are born, and that end has a universal grammar blueprint in the human mind. Then that blueprint is carried by all languages in their own specific ways, in their own ways of grammatical manifestations, and that end of the nature of language is highly rule governed. Highly systematic at the level of sounds, words and sentences and so on. But then there is the other end, after you have acquired the basic structures of your language, again in a social context, because that universal grammar or the universal language faculty has to be triggered by some social factors. But that end over a period of time introduces enormous amount of variability in your linguistic behavior. So, these are the 2 ends of language that we need to appreciate. One end which is highly rule governed, the other end which is not unsystematic or random, but which is also highly variable. We also need to appreciate that different children come to classes with different linguistic backgrounds and different social backgrounds. So, we need to appreciate that. We need to appreciate that once the basic grammatical structures are acquired, say by the age of 3, then gradually our total perspective on the world is to a large extent structured through language. We begin to see the plants and flowers and snow and ice and people in terms of the categories that language gives us. Okay, this is very, very important. Consider, for example, the simple case of, let us say, ice. There are hundreds of words in English language and also maybe in Hindi language, but typically we do make a distinction between ice and snow in the English language. So, ice is something very different. So, there is no ice on the mountains, there is snow on the mountains, but there is ice in the refrigerator. But so far Hindi language is concerned, we see ice and snow through the same one lexical item. We call both of them barf. Fridge mein bhi barf hai aur pahadon par bhi barf hai. That's how we talk about ice and snow. Consider another example. So, the example of network of relationships in your family. For a Western family, you have father, you have mother, as you have mata, pita in Hindi. But then the moment you go further, you have only grandfather, grandmother and uncle and aunt. But in the case of Hindi, for every uncle, you have a different word. If it is elder than your father, it is taya. If it is younger than your father, then it is chacha. Okay. So, similarly, for Baba, the father's father, or for him, father's son and son's son. For example, for the father becomes a pota, not just grandson, but it's a different lexical item. So, language structures our universe in different ways, and we classify the world in different. The part of linguistics that deals with the variation part, that how languages vary in society, is called sociolinguistics. And in this course and in the course on sociolinguistics, we will spend a considerable amount of time on trying to understand how language varies in relation to ethnicity, in relation to geography, in relation to gender, socio-political and economic history, power, religion, education, etc. And we will study sociolinguistics in greater detail. As I said, a teacher should be acutely aware, because the linguistic competence that a child brings to the school consists not only of the rules, because she already knows the rules of her language, not of our language, but of her language she knows all the rules. But also she knows already, when she comes to the school, how to talk to her father, how to talk to her brother, and how to talk to her grandfather. And these are different ways. These are not identical ways. So she has a repertoire of different address terms or different ways of talking to her friends, to her brothers and sisters, to her parents, and to the relatives. So she comes with that kind of variability. Consider, for example, the pronunciation of words like better and butter. Okay, let's say better. Now, for us, the word better, we will say better, or some people would say better. In India itself, some people would say betterer, right? Some people would say better. But in England, don't think that everybody says better. Some people say besser. Instead of butter, there is a standard sort of mocking that is done on English pronunciation, that look at what kind of language is this. Here BUT is but PUT is put. But we should realize that not even today and earlier, everybody, in the history of English language, for everybody, bus was not a bus, it was bus. A cup was not a cup, it was cup. Okay, and butter was not butter, it was butter or pua. Better was better. Okay, for some people, in some varieties. So what I'm saying is that variation in pronunciation, variation in speech is at the heart of language, at the social level, and a teacher should be aware of it. Why should a teacher be aware of it? Because what will happen is that when she watches a child who comes to the class saying but or bus or kub instead of cup, she is going to be stigmatized. That child is going to be pushed behind the sort of classroom and not. Similarly, there are variations at the level of words and variations at the level of sentences. If you go from one region to another region, you will find sort of regional variation. So people talk of regional dialects. We should talk of regional languages, right? Or regional variation. Better talk of regional variation if they are mutually comprehensible. Similarly, at the social level, as you move from one class to another class, there is variation. Okay, middle class speech will be slightly different from the lower middle class, and the higher class speech will be still different from the. It is on the basis of such differences in speech that linguists like us, they establish a bundle of isoglosses. So you can have, for example, an u isogloss. So this area says but and put, but this area says but and put. So there is an isogloss. Okay. So this area says better and butter, but this area says better and boa. So there is an isogloss. So such bundles of isoglosses isolate different regions and different areas, and you may have children coming from different areas to your class. So you should be able to address and understand that variation in language, and this is how language and society interact with each other. There is a very famous study of the New York City done by a very well-known linguist called William Labar. Even in the course on social linguistics, we will talk in greater detail about the New York study. But what he established was that if you look at British English, then the post-vocalic R, that means, for example, if you take a word, an expression like car park, which is, if you write in Devanagari or in Indian language, Indian scripts, you will write the R. So car and park normally. But Britishers would say car park, car park. That means there is no R. So the R that comes after the vowel sound, or R which comes before the consonantal sound, as in park, you don't pronounce that, car park. But in the American society, over a period of time, it has become fashionable to say car park. So that R pronunciation has come back for a variety of historical reasons, maybe also because of the spelling pronunciation. But now your prestige in the society is judged by whether you say car park or you say car park. Okay. If you say car park with the rolled R, then you are high in the social hierarchy. Okay. So that's the kind of variation we are talking about. Let us look at, I think we should have this slide. You will see this slide on the screen just now. This is trying to show you lexical variation in the city of Bengaluru in Karnataka. So if you look at, so this will be on your screen, and if you see this slide on your screen, you will see that in the area of among the Brahmins, this is a community called Okaliga, and there is a community called the Brahmins, as you know. For the word coffee, for the Brahmins, the word is kofi, but for the Okaliga, the word is kapi. Okay, coffee and kapi. Similarly, for the word news, the Brahmins would say samachar, but the other community, which is the Okaliga community, will say samasar. So at one side, Brahmins would say shanti, but the other people would say santi. So there is this kind of lexical variation. That means variation at the level of words. So we have just seen on the slide on your screen that there is lexical variation in Karnataka, in the city of Bengaluru, among the two communities, and teachers have to deal with such variation. You must have also heard the word accent and dialect, but as we go on, you will appreciate that everybody has an accent. So there is nothing called a bad accent or a stigmatized accent or a dirty accent or a very good high-powered sort of prestigious accent. These are categories made by us, by the society, that some accents of speaking, the way some people speak, that comes to be privileged, and once again a teacher in the classroom in language teaching, and whatever other things you might be doing in applied linguistics, you should be aware, you should be very sort of sensitively aware of this kind of variation, that you will come across people with different kind of accents, and you should not make a distinction on the basis of, so that the one child gets stigmatized and gets left out of the class, and another child gets privileged just because he or she has a different kind of accent. This distinction between this relationship between language and society has been most deeply explored by Sapir and Worf. Worf was Sapir's student, and Sapir is a well-known linguist, and both of them together established this hypothesis of the relationship between language and society. Very briefly, this hypothesis, this is again on your slide in front of you on the screen, and you can see when Worf says the world is presented in a kaleidoscopic flux of impressions which have to be organized largely by the linguistic system in our minds. So Sapir and Worf said, we cut nature up and we cut that and organize into concepts and ascribe significance as we do, largely because we are parties to an agreement. Organize it in this way, an agreement that holds throughout our speech community and is codified in the patterns of our language. So according to the Sapir, this is the sort of strongest version that, so you see the contrast. On the one hand, we are saying that we have universal language faculty, which is identical, which all human beings have. We are also saying that there is enormous amount of variation in the speech of human beings, in the language of human beings, and that children should not be discriminated against because of differences in their speech, and we should think of ways how we can use those differences as resources in the classroom rather than sort of isolate those children to the margins and to the periphery. And on the third, so these are the sort of spectrum, I am putting the whole spectrum together. On the third side, so first we saw universal language faculty, then we saw enormous amount of variability at the level of sounds, words and sentences, and finally we see that there might be some truth in Sapir-Worf's hypothesis that we see language, we see the world around us, we see the people around us, we see the colors around us, or we see the whole cosmos around us through the window of our language. So if you keep these things in mind, we will proceed and go to the next module, and as these modules unfold gradually, I am sure the relationship between language and your classroom, linguistics and language pedagogy and other fields of applied linguistics will become clearer. Thank you very much.